Okay. Kakiokitatum skata noao. Greetings to you all. Welcome to another episode of this walking podcast. And you can see it's a beautiful day here. And I'm here with my friend and colleague, Professor Margaret Macintyre Latta. And Margaret, I just thank you for taking the time today to go on this walk with me, and just invite you to introduce yourself to the listeners in the ways that you want to, and then tell us a little bit about where we are and where we're walking.
Great. Well, thank you. My privilege and honor to share a little bit of my sense making, and I look forward to getting to know you better too, Dwayne.
Mm-hmm.
What do I say about myself? Let me think. I'm very privileged to live and work and learn on Syilx territory, lands of the Okanagan peoples. And you know, when we walk here right now, this is what my office is leading. It shares office windows open onto. And there's lots of times that I'm not necessarily out here walking, but I am looking out my window and imagining myself walking on some of the paths. And this circle area right here is a place that has been a place that calls me. There's a pond not too far away that emerges in the spring, disappears late summer, and it's really fun to follow the relations of the landscape with the seasons and the different vegetation, the different animals, the different birds. If you sit down here on a quiet moment, all sorts of things come alive. So it's kind of fun. So who am I? I'm a person that feels pretty connected to the land. And quite honestly, I think of myself as a parent, a grandmother, an educator, an artist, though I say that somewhat vulnerably because I'm not sure my artwork is that worthy of being called artwork. But I do think I bring an artistic vision to everything that I see and respond to. And I'm a lifelong educator. And a large part of my understandings of myself have been built around familiarity with place and walking and getting to know place. And so if I was to ask, if I really could take you on a journey where it was me at the core, I would take us on an imaginary journey to the West Coast, where I grew up, pretty much wandering the beach close to my home every day, long hours on the beach. And so it's the territory of the Songhees, which I really did not know growing up.
Right.
That's been relatively recent in the last decade knowledge, but knowledge that I've appreciated gaining. And it's made more sense to me when I look back at some of the particulars that struck me about the beach in Victoria. There was a super connection I felt. Like when I go back to the beach, I immediately feel at home with the smell of the sea, the what I encounter on the walks along the beach, the fact that the tide goes out, and the new discoveries that come back in with the tide, walking on the logs, all of that is something I feel very deeply and feel really connected to. And I think there was a lot of teachings in that for me that have influenced how I think as an educator. And that's the other piece I'd say. I'm a lifelong educator
Mm.
and someone who cares very deeply about teacher education and ongoing professional growth.
So you were a school teacher for a while in your career?
Yes. Yeah, so I was a K through 12 art and high school English teacher.
Okay.
Through my 10 years of teaching, I taught across all those levels, and mostly in rural Alberta. And I would say I got a little, not a little, I'd say quite upset with what I encountered as a dismissal of, I guess, a dismissal of honoring good teaching practices.
Mm. You want to go this way?
We'll go around.
Okay.
Yeah. And I tried on lots of. I was young. Started teaching when I was 22, and I really struggled with finding ways to advocate for the profession. And it really bothered me that the language that I had for teaching and learning was inadequate. When I went to talk to others, I, in my heart, understood what I was trying to do and understood the embodied impacts that I felt were alive in classrooms, but I didn't have a language or the needed language, and nor the needed confidence. So when I returned to graduate school, it was for language. And I found a huge gift in curriculum theory. And I loved reading across many different texts and spent hours and hours and hours searching for thinkers that I'd read reference to in a piece, and I go down another journey of different writers and thinkers. And I love that theorizing work, but I love it because I believe that I have opened doors for myself into language that helped me affirm and strengthen what I was doing and why. And it's helped me bring that language to practicing educators.
Well, just in listening to you, I feel a lot of parallels to my own story, my own experiences. But when you were talking about the ocean, I mean, I've certainly been on beaches like that, but not feeling as comfortable as you as a prairie person. I'm often I don't know, on edge, I guess, when I'm on the edge of the ocean, because it just seems so awe-inspiring to me, and there's so much about it that's unfamiliar, like I said, growing up in the prairies. But the other thing is that, I went to grad school for, my own reasons, but similar to you, in that I found that my experience with teacher education was really inadequate for trying to make sense of what I was encountering in the classroom, and as you said, the language of how to describe better what we're up to. Now, so we're here in the Okanagan Valley. We're here at UBC Okanagan, the campus. You can see there, folks. And one of the ways that Margaret and I have gotten to know each other over the years is that Margaret is the Principal Investigator, the lead investigator for a SSHRC Partnership grant. And can you talk about that, Margaret, what the spirit and intent of that is, and maybe how it's going so far?
Yeah, so not entirely comfortable with the word Principal Investigator, because it really has been an experience of shared sense making, I'd say. At least that's what I would hope that it is. And really the whole project is about creating spaces, places, opportunities for educators to enter into complicated conversations
Mm.
and confront what uncolonizing, decolonizing, indigenizing, all of the terms that we use, what does it really look and feel like in action, and why is it so significant for what's happening in education today? And I can't emphasize enough how much is already in place in British Columbia that teachers don't need to really seize. The BC curriculum advocates for this work.
Mm.
It allows spaces for this work, and it honors it. And there are other pieces in BC, like First Peoples Principles of Learning, along with Canadian policies and documents, all support this work. And so with all of that coming together, it's we need to find ways to tie this work into Syilx perspectives, culture, knowledge, and ensure that we're creating the needed circumstances for educators to understand what it means to live, learn, teach on the lands that we're actually on.
Mm.
And that has been the starting place for this work. I draw on my own experience. I'm not professing to be an expert of any sort. I'm very much hoping that everything that we do is about creating space and bringing the needed people into that conversation to facilitate and guide. And so there's been substantial guidance throughout by Syilx knowledge keepers, elders, and community members. And I guess the main part that I would say has been made clear to me is that that trust and relationship building ground is ongoing.
Mm.
It's still fragile, and we're in year 4, moving into year 5.
Okay.
It's still fragile. That is something that is very precious, and everything takes a lot of thoughtfulness, a willingness to be wrong on all our parts, and keep ensuring ongoing contact and communication with others. The project also is one part of a large whole, and there's many efforts underway across the school district, across the Okanagan, that contribute and strengthen what we're doing. And I would see this project being successful if we can say, as we bring it to an end, that it's actually a cumulative marker for us, but that the work has really morphed and grown and is catalyzed by individual educators increasingly taking up the work, teams of schools taking up the work, and that's morphed across the Okanagan. So yeah, trust and relationship building has been the main, I guess, important piece that I think is an ongoing desire. Should we go around again?
Sure. Yeah.
Or we could walk up, but it's not, right now it's a new building.
Okay.
It's sort of in the way.
Well, we can go wherever you want to go.
Okay.
I'll follow along.
Okay. The other thing I would say is, I would say the needed practice of this work is the practice of entering into these conversations with teachers, with their students, is work that we have to do slowly. People are at different stages, phases of understanding, willingness to let go of entire control of where they're headed in advance, and that work has required teachers really beginning to share their ideas in small, safe groups.
Right.
And we've done a lot of that work in the last year or two, just creating the spaces for teachers to talk through their ideas, like the ideas forums that we'll have in the spring and May. It's an opportunity to encourage teachers not to worry about PowerPoint presentations, which is what they all say. They all say, do I need to prepare a PowerPoint, and can I practice what I'm saying? And that's not the practice I'm talking about, practice for performance. I'm talking about they need to do this work with their students to gain the needed habits, practices, modes of being that this work requires. And it's that reframing, or you said relationship denial. I think it's about seeing the relationships at play and letting them see and experience what those relationships offer as part of the materials of curriculum making. So the co-curricular-making that we're talking about in this project is about beginning to see and work with the relationships that shape and come together in any curriculum situation.
Well, I so admire the work that you all are doing, and as someone who loves curriculum studies as well, I get so impatient, I guess, with informational approaches to curriculum.
Right.
And that's what we're being subjected to in Alberta these days, as you know. And so to have such a broad and collaborative project like this as an example is really inspiring for me and for others.
And I guess I would add that I think it is that work, but I'm also aware that it's a slippery slope, and I'm using Bill Piner's words there.
Yeah.
But it is a slippery slope, and I feel it every day, right? Where we start to do this work, and then someone wants it to take it into a strategy or a handout or a framework that we're going to all follow, right?
Yeah.
So those things can be a bit...
we go
up this way.
Okay.
This is one of the things we've been doing this year and last year is restoring the grasslands out here.
Okay.
So that's one of the projects en route there, and that's had pushback, lots of good, but pushback where students have said we're only picking weeds.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Why are the flags out there?
I think it marks different places where there's what do you call them when they're weeds and they don't belong there?
Oh, invasive
species.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Those flags, they mark different things. I was wondering about it.
Right.
So, as you know, I think one of the things that I talk about a lot is colonialism.
Right.
As a shared inheritance.
Right.
And that term or that phrase, relationship denial, to me is one of the key principles of that experience. And so this idea of renewing relationships that have been denied and repairing them, that's a big part of what you were talking about, I think. But what I wanted to ask you is, how would you characterize your own relationship to colonialism, colonial worldview?
I think in my life, I think when I think back over different experiences where I've been struck by the lack of fit, for me, it actually happened very early in my life. And I would say, first of all, as a high school student, I was a good student, but I wasn't a great student. I found a disconnect for myself, which I can distinctly remember feeling, not articulating, but very strongly feeling that I had the opportunity in an arts classroom to have a very talented, gifted artist who taught the class Carol Saveston, who went on to become quite a renowned Canadian fabric artist.
Oh, okay.
She used to involve us in some of her projects and collaborative art making together, and I found a huge home in that work in terms of really valuing my what I was bringing to the conversation.
Okay.
My ideas, my sense making was very evident to me, and I felt very empowered by it. I didn't meet that in my class, say a history class, which was taught by a person that everybody called Dead Fred.
Oh my goodness.
Dead Fred was flat, and everything was fact oriented, and there was no connection offered or ways to connect with the material. So that I held on to that feeling, never articulated it, but it was very peculiar to me why no one valued my arts making. And I won't tell you that my parents valued it either. They didn't really either. But I felt I just couldn't get it. Okay, that was something I just really bothered me. And when I went to university, which is at the University of Lethbridge,
okay,
right, for my undergrad, I purposefully went away from home because I could have more control over what I chose to do, and felt like I was had more freedom, I guess.
Right.
And it was there reading Dewey, and I know you and I have talked before, and we have different thoughts around Dewey. But for me, Dewey opened my eyes reading Art as Experience, because I recognized myself in the text. And I would have been 20 years old reading it in the library, and for whatever reason, he spoke to me, and it affirmed and strengthened what I understood about myself and about the power of arts making as a way to think about sense making of all kinds. So I feel like as I entered into teacher ed there, I encountered some good like that, but also I remember that I nearly failed a class in education because I couldn't distinguish between different kinds of objectives that you had to write for your lesson plan.
Oh, I see.
And there was behavioral objectives, and I don't, for the life of me, can't remember the other two, but there were 3 categories. And every single time, no matter how many times I tried, I could not put them in the right space, okay? Because I saw relationships,
right,
and they chose not to see relationships. So anyway, that was a problem for me as I moved into during teaching. I definitely encountered it with, prescribed lesson plans. I taught through the 80s. That would have been in Alberta. They call it arrived in a box, teacher-proof curriculum.
Oh, okay.
Ugly term, okay?
Yeah.
And you could unpack that for forever. It didn't matter. Even when you opened the box, the interpretations were there, and you can muck it up. But it didn't. All those efforts denied who your students were in each class. You didn't get to know who they were, what the stories they brought. They were totally ignored. It was Dewey who helped me give language to that. He called it evil, that there was no organic connection between self and world.
Oh, I didn't know he called it evil.
Yeah, he called it evil. I know there's places that he spoke otherwise, right. But for me, that's one of the values of theorizing, is you can draw across multiple theories. And I'm searching for my language, right? So Dewey had language that has enabled me to gain more language and direction for my teaching.
Yeah.
I think the other time I bumped into a framework that I would say was colonial was in grad school when I supervised teacher candidates out in the field. Calgary at the time had a form that probably is very typical of many teacher ed programs that you just ticked off. Did they have a lesson plan? Yes. Was the classroom well organized? Yes. So it was this sort of tick sheet, and I was always left saying, none of that mattered for what unfolded, or very little of it mattered. Yes, they needed to have given advanced thought to the lesson, but you could tick all those boxes and have had a lesson where no one was engaged, a dead Fred experience.
Yeah.
And so, I would always offer a narrative of what I had encountered and heard and felt as I discussed it with teacher candidates, which I always found so much more helpful for helping teacher candidates see and attend to the relationships that were at play. Right?
Yeah.
And of course, there's a million examples at university, but
one of the things that we're interested in with this podcast is to ask people to speak about those events or those experiences in their lives, in their careers, where something happened that caused them to understand differently. And that's where we use that phrase, unlearning.
Right.
So an event or an experience that you now understand as an unlearning colonialism experience. And you've talked about, I would call it your own sort of sensibilities as with art, your relationship to art. But I'm just wondering if there's an experience or two that you could share with us that you would say goes in that sort of, you could think of it as an unlearning event or experience.
Yeah, I'm sure there's, I think all learning is unlearning in many ways. I think, can I name one experience? Let me think.
Maybe there's something here in the Okanagan Valley that in the last 4 or 5 years.
I think the understandings that I had when I initially wrote this grant have changed considerably. And the ways in which this grant has unfolded and the work has unfolded is not at all what was imagined if you go back to the original proposal, right? And it's an example where SSHRC reporting doesn't allow you to tell that story very well, okay?
Right.
That's, again, SSHRC uses that language, but the reporting doesn't actually give you space to do that. So I know I would have said many of the things I'm saying today at the beginning of the grant, but I have a much deeper sense of how important that work is today, and how thinking ahead, how much it's important to value process. So exactly how the grant has emerged and shaped each year has been very much an ongoing conversation. And originally we thought about the work being a small group of educators, 20 to 25 at the beginning, and because of COVID and the heightened awareness of educators to how important this work was through the discovery of the graves and world issues that were coming into play, we had 100 educators in our first go round.
Right.
So that changed the grant. So it became then a project where we understand everybody that gathers and participates is very much not at the same point of understanding and learning. Nor do I think that that's ever possible.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Right. But really acknowledging that there's always a texture, there's always complexities, there's always a need to be open to what's unfolding. And I've definitely apologized a lot through this grant. Apologize for things I may have overseen that didn't unfold as they should according to a protocol, to just really constantly being able to say, I'm learning alongside of you. And we're so that trust with each other, the trust with elders, has taken, I have on text elders that I contact to check things out with, to confer, to confirm arrangements that we're making. The care that all those things take is amazing. There's a certain thoughtfulness that I think I would describe myself as a thoughtful person, but I've had to be that much more attentive to it. Right. In the honoring.
What you shared reminds me of, I guess, it was a way I expressed my own unlearning, although I didn't know it at the time. So I wrote something quite a while ago now called On Making Love to Death, and it was inspired by what I'd been learning, of Niitsitapi or Blackfoot stories, and also Nihia or Cree stories. In English, I guess they would call them tricksters, right? But a lot of the stories, to me, what I take from them is this, a lot of times this desire to secure something that isn't actually possible to secure. So you're trying to, in the stories, trying to craft surety when it's not actually possible. And what I tried to show in the paper I wrote was that we see this in the field of education all the time. You were talking about objectives and how you plan everything out, but when you're actually in a relationship that's dynamic and responsive and emergent, that it doesn't look like that. Knowledge doesn't look like that. It doesn't flow like that. And so that's a really helpful example.
Yeah. Well, you're reminding me of, I've been drawing on this for recently to talk about the work of the grant, and that's Mikhail Ball's idea of traveling concepts. And there are definitely concepts that have traveled with us, accompanied us on this project, like vulnerability, like openness, like trust building. There's a needed trust in self as an educator, as well as trust in process, trust in students, trust in community. That these traveling concepts help to enable people to see more and more relationality, and also see that relationality as the place to begin learning and unlearning together. And that it keeps shaping and moving. So that idea of emergent is very much a moving text, right?
Hi, kâpimâcimohk Thanks for walking with me today,
You're
Margaret.
welcome.
Very much appreciate it.